You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Protect yourself with the VPN that we use and trust. Use our link, expressvpn.com/missionlog today and get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog. Visit expressvpn.com/missionlog to learn more.
This episode is also sponsored by BetterHelp. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/missionlog today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 525, Hope and Fear.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we examine an episode of Star Trek in our hope to provide you with the most thorough translation of that episode without fear of having missed any morals, meanings, or messages contained therein.
John, we also review them to see if they, stand the test of time.
Hey. When you have a slipstream drive, no task is too dauntless.
Don't blame John for the puns. I wrote them. If you'd like to tell us exactly how much you either loved them or not, here's how you can reach us. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on X and Facebook at Mission Log Pod. While you're at it, leave us a review and a rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on Mission Log or engage on the Roddenberry YouTube channel. And now here's John Champion with way better writing than my intro with this week's trivia.
Hey, even if that's not true, people will still know where to find us and tell us what they thought. So this week's episode, Hope and Fear, as we wrap up the 4th season of Voyager, we have a story by Rick Berman, Brannon Braga, and Joe Menosky, and a teleplay by Brannon Braga and Joe Menosky. Now, normally, I would break those things down into who did what and who went uncredited, etc. But there's a lot to unpack here. I'll try to do it in as condensed a way as I can. Brannon and Joe had some of the basic ideas: an exploration of slipstream technology, a ship called Dauntless, some back and forth between Seven and Janeway. And they had knocked out the first couple of acts and then hit several walls. Ken Biller and Jerry Taylor were involved in trying to shape the rest of the story, and Rick Berman was the one who helped them boil down their direction in using the Starfleet message and exactly who the alien antagonist would be. It was Brannon who wanted to end the season with an episode that would heavily reference other moments from Season 4, but it was Jerry Taylor who really put her foot down that this episode only merited a single episode rather than the usual Star Trek season-to-season cliffhanger. It was directed by Heinrich Kolbe, and it's been a while since Rick got the director credit on Voyager. At the top of the season, he was in the big chair for Scorpion Part 2, and he will be back for a half dozen more episodes before putting in one stop on Enterprise. Now, for a show that makes a lot of use out of recycled sets, you may be surprised to learn that the bridge and engineering room on Dauntless were brand new sets. There was some cost-cutting in the way of letting the lighting do a lot of the work, though. The bridge set has a large section of muslin stretched over a steel frame, and it was a relatively easy task to use the color change to denote going from Starfleet to something alien. The episode has nearly double the usual number of original visual effects, too, given that there is a new ship and an entirely new kind of propulsion seen throughout. And speaking of ships, how about the name Dauntless? You know how I like my ship names. There have been 3 U.S. Navy ships with that name. Perhaps better known are the multiple Royal Navy ships that have carried the name HMS Dauntless since the early 19th century. The current ship bearing that name is a more recent 2010 commission, the second of the Daring-class destroyers. Let's meet our guest stars. Hey, meet the windbag, Admiral Hayes, played by Jack Shearer. He's not new to Star Trek, and he's not even new to wearing an admiral's uniform. In DS9, he was both a Bolian and a Romulan, and then he was Admiral Strickler in the second season Voyager episode Non Sequitur. He played Hayes in the movie Star Trek First Contact, and he will make one more appearance in the same role. Finally, the alien Arturis is played by the venerable and versatile Ray Wise. His resume is extensive, and anyone who has watched Twin Peaks knows exactly who he is. But don't forget, we have highlighted Ray once before when he was a guest star on the memorable TNG episode Who Watches the Watchers. And while this is Ray's final appearance in the official Trek canon, he even had a role in a 2016 Star Trek fan film.
Your driver, Arturis, is arriving in a fancy new Federation ship of a class that, conveniently enough, no one has ever seen before. Look for the license.
Prologue. Playing a holodeck game of velocity, i.e. shoot the flying target with a phaser, Janeway is the better player, which frustrates 7 of 9. Even when Janeway chalks it up to intuition and seeing the target after she fell and lost focus, 7 is a poor loser and wants to play another round. Janeway exits the game, remarking that 7 needs to be a sport. Act 1. Janeway hasn't forgotten about that encoded Starfleet message that came through the Hirogen communications array. She's been hard at work trying to piece it together. Meanwhile, Tom Paris and Neelix have been working out trade with a nearby colony and come back to Voyager with a guest seeking passage. His name is Arturis, and Neelix introduces him as nothing short of a genius, someone who is able to instantly bridge the language gap between two species he had only just met. It's a natural ability, and Arturis speaks some 4,000 languages. This gives Janeway an idea. Perhaps he can help decode the message from Starfleet, seeing as how, to him, computer languages are just as easy as spoken ones. Arturis agrees, and in short time he's able to decode a huge portion of the garbled message. Part of it, noticed by 7, is a coordinate not too far from Voyager's current position. They set a course, and wow, there's a ship. It's unknown, but the warp signature is Starfleet. Act 2. Nobody is aboard the ship, so Tom, Tuvok, and Chakotay will take an away team to check it out. What they find is a whole new design from Starfleet, the USS Dauntless NX-01A. The design, everything, is just different from what they know, and it appears from the logs that it was sent to the Delta Quadrant on autopilot. The whole thing shudders from time to time, and when the away team proceed to engineering, they find something totally new, a quantum slipstream drive. As they investigate, the drive comes to life. The Dauntless powers up and the ship shoots away from Voyager at incredible velocity. Tom is able to disable the system long enough to bring the ship out of slipstream and back into normal space. But in a matter of seconds, the Dauntless traveled some 15 light-years away from Voyager. 2 days later, Voyager catches up to Dauntless, and a cautious Janeway has overseen Arturis' work to reconstruct the remaining messages. What he finds is potentially great news for the crew. It's a message from Admiral Hayes explaining that slipstream technology is experimental and comes with risk, but Starfleet thinks it's safe enough for Voyager's crew to make the attempt to get home. The trip will take about 3 months, and the Dauntless has been constructed for their journey with all the tools they should need to make the trip. The doctor finds no immediate medical concerns after examining the 3 who were aboard for their short ride a couple of days ago. Chakotay reports the Dauntless is in fine condition, and B'Elanna reports that while the ship is short on creature comforts like no holodeck or replicators, it should do the job. Neelix is ready to cook, and Harry is ready to go home, until 7 of 9 dumps cold water on his enthusiasm, reminding him and everyone else that Voyager is a proven ship, and leaving it behind may not be the best decision. As a precaution, Janeway orders B'Elanna to install a failsafe on Dauntless, while Tom will see if there's a way to retrofit Voyager with the quantum slipstream drive. Maybe they can, after all, take Voyager with them. In a private moment with Tuvok, Janeway expresses her concern about the seeming miracle that has dropped into their laps. The whole situation just seems a little too perfect, and as a precaution, she orders him to inspect every inch of Dauntless, while also keeping an eye on their guest, Arturis. Act 3. While the crew works on Voyager, personal logs reveal that Janeway is still unsure of Arturis, and 7 of 9 is still unsure of what her life would be like on Earth. Engineering work continues as planned, with a shutdown system installed on the Dauntless, but B'Elanna and 7 share an uncomfortable moment when B'Elanna points out, jokingly, that they'll both be outcasts in their own way if they make it home. A moment later, as 7 and Harry reach for the source of an anomalous power reading, Harry tells 7 that Earth, and other planets in the Alpha Quadrant, will be a good home, and that it wouldn't be the same without her. As she leaves, Harry finds something unusual in a console on Dauntless and calls for help from Tuvok. Back on Voyager, Janeway is still working on the last remaining fragment of the Starfleet message when she is joined by 7, who states that she will not be along for the ride back to Earth. Janeway pushes back, firmly, even when 7 denigrates the whole idea of Earth and the crew's irrational love for the place. They continue their clash when Janeway accuses 7 of being afraid of reclaiming that much more of her humanity and having to adapt. But it's better than being left adrift in the Delta Quadrant, likely to be reassimilated. They are interrupted by a chime from the computer that Janeway's latest algorithm has successfully decoded the remaining message. It's from Admiral Hayes, but it's quite different from the one they saw earlier. This one clearly states that Starfleet have been unsuccessful in finding a solution to bring Voyager home. The best they can do is send updated star charts and offer good luck. Arturis faked the message about the Dauntless, and it's confirmed when Tuvok reports that he and Harry found alien technology aboard. Janeway gives the order to convene on the Dauntless Bridge with a security detail. Act 4. Janeway and team beam on to the Dauntless Bridge and confront Arturis with the evidence they have amassed. He's incredulous and points the finger literally at 7 of 9, claiming that she faked the message. When Janeway orders him to the brig, Arturis recklessly rips a console panel away and activates a control that returns the ship to its alien state. It also happens to be a force field which protects him from the security team. Harry quickly starts beaming everyone back aboard Voyager, but Arturis has some kind of jamming technology. Only Janeway and 7 remain on Dauntless as it goes into slipstream warp. Voyager will have to follow, under Chakotay's command, and that means trying out some of the enhanced warp technology the crew have applied to their own ship. Back on Dauntless, Arturis makes his motivations clear. He's bringing Janeway and 7 back to his home, such as it is. You see, when Janeway cut a deal with the Borg for safe passage in exchange for helping to defeat Species 8472, Arturis's people had been pulling for 8472 in that particular battle. They had stayed ahead of the Borg for ages, unassimilated. But as soon as 8472 were no longer a threat, the Borg swept in and assimilated all but 10 or 20,000 of them, all direct fallout from Janeway's tenuous bargain. Now Arturis is going home, inside Borg space, with the intention of handing over Janeway and 7 to be assimilated. And he knows he will be too, but that's irrelevant. He addresses 7 that this is what she wanted all along, isn't it? Act 5. Voyager struggles to get into slipstream velocity with all her modifications, and even when she does, she can't stay there for long, just enough to catch up to the Dauntless. And on the Dauntless, Janeway and 7 are in the brig. 7 suggests that she could cross the force field with a modification to her Borg technology, and Janeway obliges by using a monofilament from her comm badge. While she makes the appropriate adjustments, Janeway remarks that 7 seems to be having second thoughts about joining the collective. 7 admits that she has no desire to go back, but also an unease about being more human. Janeway reminds her that Seven belongs with the Voyager crew. Escaping from the brig, Janeway and Seven make their way to engineering to shut down the warp core, but Arturis has already locked them out of the controls and increased speed. They'll be in Borg space much sooner now. Janeway suggests that Seven divert power to a thruster to slow things down, and that is a success. Arturis is thrown from his controls as Dauntless takes a plunge, and Janeway enters the bridge to confront him. She tries to reason with him, to encourage him to survive and be an example to his people. But at this point, Arturis is only motivated by revenge. He destroys navigational controls as they get closer yet to Borg space. But Dauntless is rocked when Voyager catches up and fires directly on the ship. Dauntless's shields are down, and transporters are locked on to Seven and Janeway. The captain is beamed to safety just as Arturis fires his weapon at her. But he remains on board to meet his fate with the Borg as Voyager reverses course and follows the slipstream away to safety. The slipstream around Voyager collapses after an hour, but they made up 300 light-years on their journey and avoided another Borg confrontation. The confrontation on the holodeck continues, though, as Janeway and Seven play another round of Velocity. Janeway wins again, and Seven is more interested in returning to work, hoping to find another way to revive the slipstream technology. It occurs to Janeway that maybe Seven is interested in getting back to Earth now, perhaps in embracing her humanity. But Seven says she isn't, though nothing is impossible. Janeway fires up another game, and the two play another round. The end.
Well, my hope and or fear has been assuaged with such a wonderful recap, John.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm going to
you.
try
I
and
appreciate
just, just massage those two words in there. And you know what?
And, every few minutes, just to remind everybody the title, we should do that.
Well, I mean, we're not dauntless to that fact. Can I use that word in that context? No.
Well, maybe not in there, but whatever. As the velocity of the show increases, we will find more opportune times to drop those in.
Slip it into the stream.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Hey, we start out with like a Jedi training exercise. That was kind of cool. That was a fun way to use that technology, I thought.
I was immediately reminded of Spock versus Kirk. Playing chess in Where No Man Has Gone Before, where Spock says to Kirk, irritation, one of your Earth emotions. And that kind of playful competition.
Yeah.
Right?
Smug, one of your Vulcan emotions.
That's right.
Yeah. 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 That was nice.
Love
It was
that.
a good moment. We have not seen a sleeveless 7 of 9 before, and I thought it was interesting how they did the Borg implant makeup, that the hand implant that we see all the time, it just kind of like stops right up her forearm. But then she's got this really big bit of Borg tech on her other arm, and it almost looks like this big scar sort of thing, but with a lot more kind of webbing from the Borg tech. I thought that was a cool looking appliance.
I saw that, and then I went all the way back to like Scorpion and then Raven. So the development of her new makeup and costuming.
Yeah.
And that particular implant is still there, like on the back of her, I think it was left-hand side tricep. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, it was there.
Yeah, they carried it over. Nice. Mm-hmm.
I don't blame Seven for not understanding unsportsmanlike conduct. I mean, she was modified and programmed by the Borg, so unsportsmanlike doesn't really apply.
Yeah, and I don't even think you could have that conversation preemptively and just say, we're going to go play a game. One of us will win the game. One of us will lose the game. But you're not supposed to leave the game disappointed and angry if you lose. Here's what that conduct is supposed to be. Well, then why are we playing it? Why are we keeping score?
Exactly.
You know? Yeah. And I have to say, 7 of 9 is right about intuition in a way. She says intuition is a human fallacy, the belief that you can predict future events. And yeah, I mean, she is right that it is a fallacy. You can't rely on intuition as a direct shortcut to truth with a capital T, or fact with a capital F. However, intuition, kind of more generically speaking, we've kind of talked about it. Popular Psychology did a great article about it a few years ago, saying that pattern recognition is a skill that can be honed consciously or subconsciously that kind of makes intuition happen. And I think that's what Janeway is explaining very well here. It's just like, yeah, intuition, but here's what happened. I sensed this over here, I sensed that over there, and then I took my shot, So, good moment. We know this is a show that references earlier episodes, and it's kind of cool to see something from a while back, like that encrypted data being relevant again. I was glad for that. And then
data with a small d, not a big
data
D.
with a small d. Yeah, not big D data. Yeah,
right.
And then Arturis, I'm sure you thought the same thing. It looked like Egghead from Batman. I mean, and I don't say that in a bad way. Like it's not like, oh, it was a joke. It was just like, here's a reference I have in my head.
I actually thought that the makeup he looked a lot more like, and I think it was James Caan. Was it James Caan? It was Alien Nation.
In Alien Nation, yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, it would turn into a TV show with Gary Graham and the guy.
And Mandy Patinkin was in the movie. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
reminiscent of that, and honestly, reminiscent of the Telosians, just with a little more natural-looking shape to the head. Just taking a skull and kind of elongating it instead of the big sci-fi kind of dome head. You look great. I thought the makeup was really good, and I don't want to skip too far ahead to talk about how great Ray Wise is, but I thought the makeup was very effective. I still couldn't look at that and not think about Vincent Price.
Excellent. An excellent example, John.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Artur says to Seven, "You are more attractive than the average drone." I felt that was a strange line. It felt a little out of place, and not in the way that it lands now in 2024, but in the, okay, you might as well just say that something about Seven, you are connected with her backstory in some way.
Yeah.
Right? I felt the tip was a little too heavy.
Okay.
That line.
Fair enough. I do like the barbing between these two. Like, that line feels out of place, perhaps, but I like all the other cues that are happening in that scene, where she refers to him as species, whatever it is, 116. And he's
is that what you call us?
Like, all of that stuff was really well played, and it works really well in the rewatch, too. When you go back and go, oh, we know where this is leading, right? Oh, maybe Starfleet wants us to proceed to these coordinates, or maybe the messages stay away. Like, you don't know,
right?
But you just decide to go there. Okay.
So this is just one of those, hey, did you guys notice this too? Let's let an alien we've never met, who has miraculously ingratiated himself with only 2 of your crew and a questionable 2 at best.
Yeah.
Now let's let him access our sensitive encrypted data. I mean, how could that possibly be a bad thing?
That always goes so well for anybody on Star Trek. I gotta say, man, the interiors, I know how much you love the Prometheus exterior. Yeah, the interior on that ship, not so great. Interior of the Dauntless looks really cool. Except for that plasma sphere in engineering, because that looks like they bought it from Spencer's Gifts.
I'm glad you brought that up. I don't agree with that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Because I do love me some Spencers, and if you know that reference, then you love walking malls too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're right. I do love the Dauntless Bridge. I like
cool.
the lighting scheme.
Yeah.
I like that it wasn't as bright as the Prometheus, because I felt that for a warship, Prometheus was a little too super bright. I love the standing consoles. I thought the standing consoles as a new set design element were phenomenal.
Beautiful.
Just gorgeous. Yep. But I do love the plasma ball. I love a good plasma ball. I love a good sharper image reference plasma ball. Right?
Okay. All right. All right. You can have it.
I also love hearing Magel's voice on a new starship. I love her when she's referenced on every new starship. Even for just a brief reference or two. I love. There's a lot of love here.
Yeah.
I love when Tuvok looks at Tom Paris, and who's explaining slipstream drive, and he says, "Fascinating. Can you make it stop?"
Tuvok has gotten some great lines recently. He really has,
Yep.
Of course, Starfleet did, fake Starfleet did 47 trial runs. So I have to figure that Arturis picked up 47 as a recurring theme in the messages that then he decided to fake, just to make it sound that much more authentic.
He is good with patterns, he said. So
He is.
Yeah.
He is. 7 of 9 throwing cold water on Harry's enthusiasm. It actually was really perfect in that situation because her logic was spot on. It played true to character. It played nice. And I mean, the Dauntless has no holodeck or replicators. That sounds like that would be kind of a nightmare trip for these people who are so well taken care of on Voyager.
There's an interesting line, though, about when Janeway says, Neelix, you're going to have your work cut out for you. And he goes, I am ready, willing, and able, Captain. It was so serious.
Yeah.
You know?
Like he should have more of that.
Yeah.
He should absolutely have more of that. Speaking of more of, when Tuvok says that his mental discipline is rubbing off on Janeway.
I love that.
It was great. And
Yeah.
that's what I want more of. I want more of this fantastic Janeway and Tuvok as old friends, but professionals who respect each other and know each other so well. And Janeway is absolutely right. I mean, even before you know the twist in this story, it is time to look this particular gift horse in the mouth, especially if there are no chocolates on the pillows.
Well, totally.
Because I do not want to stay in that hotel.
This isn't germane to the episode, but if you were going to judge, chocolate on pillows, how do you feel Andes versus Almond Roca?
Oh, you know what? See, I usually prefer an Andes right after dinner. So
The mint, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So what I've found is that some places will just do like a little dark chocolate, like a little Ghirardelli square,
Ooh, yeah.
or maybe like a little Godiva thing like that.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me. Mhm.
Okay. All right. For our Epicurean fans out there.
Yep.
3 months full of slipstream travel. I'm just... Hear me out. Why not send an advanced team on the Dauntless? Maybe, I don't know, a hologram that can endure that? With a backup that you actually have, right?
Yeah, maybe a hologram with some medical training. Yeah.
Just because you don't really need living beings on the ship, since they've already established that it kind of runs itself.
Yeah.
Well, let me be fair. The illusion of the ship that they know runs itself. And for the long-term effects, I thought it would have been funny if the Doctor referenced something about turning into lizards.
Yes.
Right? Because the last time that happened, where they reached a certain velocity, weird things occurred. Right?
That would have been cool.
I do love myself a good opening shot of any kind of either a nebula or a really nice spacescape, or, in this case, the Dauntless's main hull. So gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love the look of that ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to tell you what I don't love. I don't love the overlapping personal logs between Janeway and Seven. Like, it's good information, it's good content, and I love Seven's sense of her own importance, but I don't love that style.
I love that style.
But I want you to have that. Yes,
No,
just like a plasma ball. I want you to have that. Yes,
It's just these things. I like it because it's new to Star Trek narrative framework.
Yeah, true.
And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, it kind of reinforces the competition that they've, established at the very beginning of the episode, where Janeway's speaking. Now Seven, has taken over. Now Janeway has taken over. Now Seven has taken over.
Yeah.
So I know stylistically, it's not for everybody, but and it's certainly not for you in your notes. But I just that's new. I thought that was interesting,
I'm glad that this is not a two-parter episode, but had it been a two-parter episode, I think it would be interesting to get other logs from other people with their take on it. Like, we don't necessarily need to know what Harry is thinking because we know what Harry's thinking, but some of the others who have maybe mixed feelings or concerns about this particular situation kind of would have been cool to hear. Speaking of people with mixed feelings and concerns, B'Elanna rightfully points out that Seven will be looked upon with suspicion, just like she will be as an ex-Maquis. And then B'Elanna says, it's a joke. And I'm thinking, no, it's not.
I didn't take it as a joke.
No.
I watched it.
B'Elanna, you can't say that and then say it's a joke. That is borderline bullying. Yeah.
It was a little aggressive. Also, +1 for John for mastering that transition. That was very nice.
Thank you. I look at the segue there. Yeah. The smile that Seven gives when she's leaving the room, leaving Harry, it really felt like a big deal. And since it is such a big deal, why aren't they all talking about it later,
I love that smile just because, one, it just really shows like Jerry's mastery over her craft. Mm-hmm. Like understanding the moment and reading the room and understanding her script and like, the emotion that Seven's supposed to have at the time. But I also like that it's probably one of the most honest moments between Seven and Harry that we've seen so far. And I'm like unironically saying this. I think she really understood what Harry meant when he said it won't be the same without you. I think that it landed. Yep. And that's important in these small moments where a lot of what I have criticized in the past have been really forced moments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're totally right. And then we go to Seven and Janeway's moment, and Janeway's wow. We're gonna have to come back to that because wow, and then it gets really real, and Seven lays it on the line, and there's a lot to get into there.
It's an interesting turn in the episode, and I'm not exactly sure if it's dead set in the middle, but we are in Act 3. Mm-hmm. And Janeway says, "We've given you a lot, Seven. It's time you gave something in return." And I'm not sure how you feel about this, John. I think I know. I have a huge problem with this line. And if you want to hear about the full context of what I have to say, this will be available on our uncut Patreon recording for this episode on patreon.com/missionlog in the van.
I'm sticking around for it.
Yep.
Yep.
In terms of timestamp 2709. Mm-hmm. This is where I love Kate and just her incredible skill as a performer. When she hears when she sees the actual truth coming from the Admiral's decoded message, her reaction was perfect. There was a pause. She swallowed so much emotion. And then the lighting was so perfect where she tilted her head back, and you saw the welling of tears, and then she just swallowed that.
Yes.
Right? And then she just resolved herself from anger and disbelief into acceptance of course, this is the truth. Of course, it was too good to be true. Right?
I am so glad you marked the time code on that because I love that scene so much. And it just... That's acting. That is such the you don't need a word of dialogue. Nope. You just need that very true emotion. Yep. And it is perfect. I must have rewound that 5 times because I just loved how that unfolded. Wow. Mm-hmm. And then maybe one of my favorite lines is just as we go to the act break, let's get weapons.
Yep. Click, click.
Yeah. Because you have a very dramatic walk and talk in the corridor. You know it's getting serious. And then let's get weapons. I love it. Right. And then, man, when the confrontation happens with Arturis, I just love Ray Wise in this moment trying so hard to dig his way out of this. He doesn't turn into the mustache-twirling bad guy and haha, here's my plan. Oh, no. He's ready to just throw everybody under the bus around him. It's great.
We learn soon that he has nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And that's the most dangerous, type of character. Here was something that was a little weird, though. When Janeway's security team beams on the Dauntless to arrest him, the female officer on the far left, screen left, was she wearing one of Kess's wigs? Because her hair seemed a little unkempt for Starfleet style. Like it wasn't in like the realm of a Janeway's new Bob, or say even Samantha Wildman's style of hair, which was like pre-Bob Janeway. It was just a little Kess season 1 like. Yeah. So it was a little weird.
Yeah. By the way, in all of that inspection of the Dauntless, did nobody see the giant holodeck control lever just under that panel on the bridge? Nobody? Because he literally just rips it off. And it's this giant physical lever right there. And then finally, Tuvok with the phaser. Finally getting a shot in. Which, by the way, I hate to spoil it, but we are coming up toward the end of the show. That phaser shot really has nothing else to do. We just...
Nothing.
It never comes up again. I didn't even put it into my recap because I kept waiting for a moment where it'd be like, oh, well, I'm dying of these phaser burns, so I might as well get assimilated. Like, no.
Nope.
Nothing. It's just this little darkened starburst pattern on his clothes.
It's like, look what you did to my couture. How dare you?
Right.
So Harry says, I've got everyone but Seven and the captain. I'm thinking you might want to get the captain off first.
Thank
you.
And
maybe everyone else off, because the captain's kind of important. But hey, there's artificial tension built into the scene. I get it. Here's something that I do love about Rick's direction in this. Mm-hmm. So the scene where Arturis is really he's spilling the beans, he's really kind of confessing like why he is doing what he's doing. The way that scene is framed, so Arturis, or Ray Wise, is on camera or on screen, kind of right justified. Janeway and Seven are center screen, loose focus or soft focus.
Yeah.
And when he's confessing, you can actually see them react to his plight. And I'm just like, wow, what an incredibly framed scene to get it all in there. And you don't have to cut away to different emotions, right? You're seeing it all happen in organically real time.
That is a good catch. Yeah, absolutely. Great moment at the beginning of Act 5. I bet the captain already has a plan. Cut to, any ideas? Very Firefly moment. I thought that was terrific.
Malin Nanar, was she acting weird? Yeah, weird. Trap.
Yeah, right. Just the timing was right, and all you needed was the visual. You cut from Voyager to the brig, and it's Kate Janeway's hand on the force field. Any ideas? So good. So good.
Seven, do you have something in your Swiss Army board knife bag of tricks that can get us out of this force field? Of course you do. Of course you do. Why wouldn't you, right?
Of course. Okay, but Seven's joke was marvelous.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, talk about great. In this episode, we've given Tuvok some great lines, and then we've given Seven some absolutely terrific material to work with, and not hitting you over the head with it. But this is one of those moments where Star Trek can do humor, but not do jokes. And it just feels real. It doesn't feel like a forced moment. It feels like something that comes from the character.
But deadpan always works well for characters like Seven or Odo or Spock. Those characters. Or Data with a big D. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, something very funny to me about when she throws the ship out of slipstream and hits the thruster, the sudden G-forces. So there's Arturis flying around on the bridge, holding onto the console, and then the sounds of the airplane dipping down.
Yeah.
I love it, but it was also funny to me, but I still love it.
We have a lot of smart people in our audience, for all the scientists out there. So here's a question. How do photon torpedoes accelerate faster than the ships that are either in transwarp or regular warp?
Oh,
because I'm asking this unironically. So, I mean, it's obviously there for action, but action has a different dramatic effect than science fact. So, just asking for friends.
Sam, right? Paul, get on it.
Get on it. Two-barreled giant blasters are just hidden around the ship. I mean, they don't roll off consoles when the ship gets nearly pitched vertically, the previous scene.
Right.
Hey, here's a gun! Because it didn't roll off a very slick console. So
in an episode full of interesting dramatic choices and dramatic moments, I want to ask you, I want to point out this one and ask you how you feel about it, because, instead of the dramatic death scene, instead of a ship blowing up, something like that, we're just left with this cold resolution about the chilling end that is about to meet Arturis as he sits there, and we hear the voice of the Borg in the background. I thought it was one of the most chilling endings that they've carried off in this series.
Sounds like everyone will be packed in like sardines in this new ship. Hope somebody brought soap and fear.
We'll get right back to Hope and Fear after a word from this week's sponsors.
So, John, let's talk about something that's become as essential as a phaser on stun in today's digital age.
Whoa, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's having a VPN you can trust. The kind that shields your online activity from prying eyes while you boldly surf. Surf, because a lot of people do that. And trust me, we've done our research on this.
Yep.
Just like a captain trusts the crew, we trust ExpressVPN to keep our data safe and secure.
That's right. Okay, let's warp through these reasons why ExpressVPN is our favorite VPN. First up, ExpressVPN does not log your online activity. You know, like those pesky, cheap, or free VPNs, and they're not really free, that try to make a quick latinum by selling your data to advertisers. ExpressVPN does not play that game. They even use a technology called Trusted Server, making their servers as forgetful as a Ferengi in a negotiation.
And speaking of speed, ExpressVPN now uses Lightway, a VPN protocol faster than a slipstream drive. Other VPNs make your connection feel like you're navigating through a spatial anomaly, but with ExpressVPN, even HD streaming with zero buffering happens at warp speed.
Plus, it's user-friendly. It's so user-friendly, even a PAC-LED could use it. No technical skills needed. Just fire up the app, tap one button to connect. Seriously, it is that easy. And you know what's cool? It's not just us singing its praises. CNET, The Verge, and a whole fleet of tech journals have rated ExpressVPN as the #1 VPN in the galaxy.
So, if you want to protect yourself with the same VPN we trust, head over to expressvpn.com/missionlog today and get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Hey, how is your social battery holding up? Feeling a bit drained, like a dilithium crystal after a warp jump? Or are you bursting with energy, like it's a charged phaser ready for action? Let's dive in and explore what's been draining or charging those social reserves of yours.
With social gatherings picking up after the winter, it's easy to find ourselves spread thin. But finding that balance is key, isn't it? Some folks thrive in the midst of a bustling crowd, while others recharge best with a little alone time. And you know, therapy can really help us figure out what works best for us. It's like having our own personal counselor aboard a starship, guiding us through the complexities of social dynamics. Speaking of therapy, John, you mentioned before that you're an advocate for it.
I absolutely am. And I've said it before, and it really is true, that therapy is not just about major trauma. It's about learning positive coping skills. It's about setting boundaries and becoming the best version of yourself. In fact, very, very much in tune with this spot for our friends at BetterHelp, I've been examining this very topic lately, trying to figure out how I need to recharge my own social battery and how much time I need as my introvert self and how much I need as my extrovert self. It's been very enlightening and valuable for me. And you know what's great? With BetterHelp, therapy is entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Plus, you can switch therapists anytime at no extra charge.
So if you've been thinking about starting therapy, why not give BetterHelp a try? It's like having a counselor at your fingertips whenever you need them. Ready to find your social sweet spot? Visit betterhelp.com/missionlog today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/missionlog. Engage your journey to better mental health today.
You know, Norman, at the end of our observation segment, I talked about that chilling moment, seeing Arcturus resigned to his fate. And I'm really interested and fascinated by Arcturus's motivations here. I think he makes for the right kind of adversary to face in a show like this instead of what we sometimes get, the mustache-twirling bad guy, you know. But what I really love is how Voyager's presence has this even greater impact in the Delta Quadrant. We've hit on that a few times in the past, but then we kind of get out of it. There is really fantastic stuff here about how the smallest actions, or maybe in this case a very large action, might have far-reaching consequences that Janeway or anybody else could not even imagine. In all of these cases, individuals are acting with their best self-interest in mind and actually maybe being considerate of how their actions affect others. I mean, that is what the Prime Directive is all about, right? But in this case, so interesting to me that we have a moment where you can absolutely see Janeway's point of view, what got us past species 8472. And you can understand the motivation of, okay, the Borg are bad. Every experience with the Borg has been bad. We know that the Borg are bad for this section of space, but let's just try to get through and live to see another day. And then this happens. And I like that Arturis is not a politician. He's not a warmonger. He's not an evil scientist. He's not any of these things. He's just somebody who is very smart. Presumably his whole society is kind of like him. He doesn't seem to be particularly special out of them. He just happens to have some terrific skills and is so deeply personally touched by what's gone on and connects the dots to the bigger story of what happened all those months ago. And of course, it directly ties back to Seven of Nine because she is the one Borg who stayed around after the events of Scorpion. By the way, totally a side note here, but I do wonder if this has any impact on the Borg that we would be able to tell, having assimilated a whole lot of Arturis' people, like if they all had that talent for language and algorithms and decoding, et cetera, like do they pick all of that up as well? But yeah, we may never know. The Borg are already formidable as a foe.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Like, even if they assimilated them, I think they already have like the combined linguistic technicalities of like millions of species.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, John. And I think that, not stealing my own notes from later on, what I wanted to address is there is a reality to Voyager appearing in Caretaker and the repercussions of having this unstoppable force that was abruptly inserted into the Delta Quadrant, where this force, this technology, these people never were before. And that's something like, let's take a look at, the old adage of, if you drop a pebble in a still pond, what do the ripple effects, what do they affect as well, tangentially with other ripple effects if you drop another pebble in a pond. And that's what exactly, where we are with Voyager right now. We're looking at what are those significant repercussions of Janeway's decisions, however benign, or however affecting that they are in terms of protecting Voyager to make sure that they can get home, but making those decisions that will affect things in a way that she's never even conceived. And when you hear that, like if you were a Starfleet captain, let's take all of this just into the realm of the reality that we believe that it is. When somebody like a Arturis says, I'm not blaming her, pointing at Seven of Nine, I'm blaming you, Captain Janeway. You're the one who caused my race to be annihilated. Yeah, because of your decision, your selfish decision to preserve yourself. Now, look, we can all quarterback this and say, like, well, of course Janeway has to do that because she has to protect her crew. It's her promise that you and I have both said on this show that she is sworn to uphold. But at the same time, though, there is always something else. There's always an effect from the cause.
Well, and look, to be fair, okay, there's one way to look at this problem and say that Janeway made a decision out of self-preservation, which is an understandable concept, particularly to a species as advanced as Arturis presumably is, that you're making the right decision in the moment, trying to take in all the variables that you can possibly grasp. All right, so there is that. And you could even say that Janeway may not have been knowingly doing something that would affect Arturis and his people, but she in some way bears a responsibility for the outcome of that decision. All right. At the same time, I think we also have to be able to look at this the way that Arturis described it earlier in the show, which is, you're not mad at a storm for doing what a storm does.
Or you're not mad at a scorpion for doing what it does.
Aha! Right. So things happen in the universe based on a variety of motivations, right, that may not have any consideration whatsoever, positive or negative for you, because they don't even know that you, Arcturus, exist, however many light years away you may be. So on the one hand, like, it is very easy to understand the personal experience that he has from this. How can you not? On the other hand, there has to be a point where you have to separate yourself from the outcome and just say, these things happened. They're beyond my control, and honestly, they're beyond Janeway's control as well. She was either going to get killed by the Borg, or she was going to get killed by Species 8472, or whatever. She found a way to survive.
There's a third option, though. There's always a third option, right? And
which was
Chakotay's plan. Why do we have to insert ourselves in this fight at all? And this is something that I wanted to bring up later on in this discussion.
Yeah.
But what if Chakotay's plan was listened to, or at least entertained? What if Chakotay convinced Janeway and they allied themselves with who would eventually be Arcturus's people, who were so good at hiding from the Borg that they could have hid Voyager for that time? That's the whole point of Scorpion.
Well, look, you're going to throw Scorpion.
Right.
I'm going to throw Year of Hell back at you and say that there is no way at all to account for every possible outcome. So you have people who are making decisions based on whatever the current information is. But let's say you did that. Okay, let's say that they abandoned ship, that they took their escape pods, they went to various places. And what happens then if the Borg assimilate Voyager? Maybe they also extrapolate where some of those escape pods went, and some of those Voyager crew get assimilated anyway. And maybe following the same path, they just end up where Arcturus' people's colonies are. So there's really no good way to know. You know, and I think that's partly what makes it tragic for Arcturus, because it's this understandable thing. I want to place blame somewhere.
Sure.
We survived for all these centuries, and we were a step ahead of the Borg for all these centuries, and look how smart my people are. Mm-hmm. But then one day something changed.
Yeah.
But that one day that something changed, it could have been Janeway and Species 8472. It could have been the Hirogen. It could have been somebody else.
I don't agree with that at all.
Okay.
I don't agree with that at all.
Why?
Because the thing is that Voyager was the anomaly that shouldn't have been. Right?
Well, you can't say it shouldn't have been. It just is.
Well, because the caretaker forced the anomaly to happen. It wasn't happening.
That's what the caretaker does.
Only in that particular instance, though, and that is the thrust of this series for sure. And that's why I think Voyager has such a more of a tragic trajectory than I think a lot of the Star Trek series realize, because they're not supposed to be there, right? Everything that they do isn't there organically. You know, the choices that they make, the alliances that they forge, the people that they meet or leave behind, everything has a ripple effect in the negative because they're not supposed to be there. They are the greatest negative influence in a positive space that originally was going along as it was supposed to go along based on the natural evolution of the Delta Quadrant. But once you threw that in there, it's like essentially, it's kind of like a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, right? You know, all of a sudden you have this technology that's not supposed to be there, and then people are vying for power for this technology. All of the artifacts, all the technology, going all the way back to Living Witness. Living Witness, the war between the Vendicans and the Curians wouldn't have never happened if it weren't for Voyager.
Yeah, but see, I take exception with the phrase "supposed to be," because supposed to be is, you know, by whose rule, by whose definition. The fact is that it's there. And like the Borg are just there in the Delta Quadrant. The caretaker, for that matter, is just there. The caretaker, himself, herself, their self, it's just a naturally occurring phenomenon.
They are.
Use the tech. They are, yeah.
Yeah.
Using the technology that is available to them.
Right, but
that's what all these species are doing.
But they're the naturally occurring phenomenon that pulled something else that wasn't naturally occurring into the Delta Quadrant. That's what changes the paradigm of power, right? So everything that happens when Voyager comes into the Delta Quadrant isn't supposed to happen.
I see. I'm not going to say supposed to.
Okay. All right.
Because they just are.
I know. Well, I mean, that may be a little bit of a flexible term, but if Voyager was never there, then the natural order of how things progressed would have happened.
But that natural order of how things progressed might have been the Borg just taking over many more species and planets. It might have been,
But that's not Voyager's responsibility or problem.
Sure.
That's the thing. I see, it's, of course, Arcturus is racked with grief and needs to place that somewhere. That's absolutely natural. But at the same time, though, seeing Voyager there and seeing Janeway being blamed for this, I'm not exactly sure if that is the natural order of things as they should have unfolded.
I love this as a discussion. I think we need to continue this in Discord. I want to move to another point because I think there are other things that we need to hit. So I'm gonna drop it to you because I know you've got more in your notes and then I got more in my notes.
Well, I mean, the only thing that I really want to bring up, aside from some of the things that we're going to have, like John and I have extensive notes, and sometimes the passion of our discussion leads to more time.
All the notes go out the window.
Yeah, so that's where you're going to have to sign up to see the uncut version of this because we're going to continue our discussion on Patreon, the uncut version of this, and also on our Discord and After Dark. So you do that at patreon.com/missionlog. You're going to be able to find all the details to follow us there. But there is something to be said about, what's the old saying? If something sounds too good to be true, it usually is. So I love that Janeway admits that the situation with Arcturus is a little too perfect. The chocolates, on the pillows and things like that nature.
Right.
What I love about that is that I was waiting for this moment in the series to happen where she's finally like, you know what? This just doesn't smell right. It doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah.
And even Tuvok's like, even the way he says it, he's like, about, I'm glad that, my discipline has rubbed off on you. He's basically saying, without disrespecting her, how many times am I going to have to say I told you so? Right?
Right.
And I like that this is there finally. I like that the writers are acknowledging the fact that Janeway doesn't have to trust, or to place hope in certain situations that just seem too good to be true. She's smarter than that. She's more capable than that. She's more logical than that. And I like that she realized that earlier than later, even though that later was a little bit too late, in order to provide, but that's the drama of this. But I do like that there is that message in there where you just can't hope that something is more than you think it is.
Well, one of her lines that I wrote down that I thought was so good, I've learned to walk the line between hope and caution.
Yes.
And that's what I like about Janeway in this episode, because she is the right balance between ambition and cautiousness. And she's driven by the goal, which is get everybody home, but she's checking her work and not getting ahead of herself in the process. And you have other people to balance that out. Like you have Harry's enthusiasm, which is well placed, and you've got Tuvok as the balance, saying like, let's talk about.
You also have Chakotay in this, though, who's serving himself well as first officer in the last few episodes.
Yes.
We've mentioned this before.
Yes, very good point. Yeah. And I like Janeway trusting her gut about Arcturus, but she's sort of putting everything in check until she's got evidence. And this whole thing, this is a lesson in critical thinking. And I think we can't have too much of it in Star Trek or anywhere else in the world right now, for that matter.
True.
It's really nice to see.
I have a question for you, John.
Yes, please.
Is the grass greener in the D?
Ooh. For whom?
"Quote unquote" in the D is trademark Mission Log, but has been brought up like many times by After Dark because thanks Dom and everyone, but Dom really does love pushing the in the D marketing. There's an interesting line from B'Elanna in this episode. "I'd rather face the music at home than spend the rest of my life in the Delta Quadrant." And I find this line so fascinating because she's the exact opposite to Tom's feelings on this matter, as we saw in his reaction to the letters that came through with the data stream that we're referencing in this episode.
Right.
Seven has a point also. B'Elanna and the Maquis crew members, what's left of them, will no doubt be tried under Starfleet law. But what is at home for B'Elanna to make her feel this way, to make her feel the way that she says, I'd rather spend the rest of my life, face the music at home than spend my life in the Delta Quadrant? What does she have there? What does anyone that's a Maquis have in the Alpha Quadrant that they can't reinvent for themselves in the Delta Quadrant? And that I always thought, that's interesting because Tom said, you know what? I got everything I want here. I don't have to worry about being at home. I don't have to worry about being that old life that I had, that old optionless, futureless life. I can go anywhere I want in the Delta Quadrant, be anyone who I want to be.
That's an interesting idea. Because, well, first of all, I feel like they lost the opportunity when they didn't stay on the planet with the 37s.
Yes.
That sounded great.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They could have just stayed there. Okay. Voyager is great. The ship Voyager is great, but it's also a ship of finite resources. Space is big. They could be traveling, yes, it might make it 70 years, but there could be large swaths of that time where there is nothing, for better or for worse, no Borg, but also no planets to stop by and, refill the water tanks or whatever you need. So there is an uncertainty about being there unless you decide to go colonize a planet or stick around when you have another opportunity like the 37s were going to give you.
Or the planet that gives you pleasure. Does this not pleasure you?
Or the pleasure planet. Exactly. Love that place, So it seems like if you get back to Earth, well, truly in the world of Star Trek, no place is 100% safe because aliens show up and threaten Earth all the time. But there is the protection and the comfort of the known. You've got Earth, you've got colonies on Mars, you've got colonies on the moon. It's a hop, skip, and a jump to get to Vulcan or wherever else you might want to go. So maybe that's the appeal. Maybe it's just more people than the 146, 7 others that you've been looking at for the last 4 years. Yeah, I get what you're saying. For a guy like Tom, he might think, this is what I want. I want to be on a ship. But what comes the day that you don't want to be on a ship anymore? If they are stuck out there for another 20 years, at that point he's saying, boy, I really should have stayed on that other planet when I had the chance.
Sitting around waiting for the Borg to get you. How about Nope and Fear?
Well, we hope everyone has stuck around for this long because, John, our fear would be if we actually lost anyone in the conversation before we got to this point, which is our traditional end of a mission log recap where we take a look at the episode in total, our observations, our discussion points, and see if this episode withstands the test of time, and if we were able to mine any morals, meanings, or messages contained, quote-unquote, therein. So this is the season finale of Voyager, Season 4, Hope and Fear. Let's start with John. Let's sum this up in so many words or less, because we don't have a lot to say about this now, do we?
Right. Well, I'll try to be relatively quick here and just say that what I really want to come from this episode is that now that we've had Janeway and Seven argue on this other level and reveal some truths here, I want this to inform Seven's character, and Janeway's for that matter, going forward. And I don't want it to just be wrapped up neatly with another game of velocity at the end and saying, okay, well, that serves as the metaphor and now we're just going to move forward. I like these kinds of tough reveals to be able to peel back more and more layers about the character, and hopefully we see this continue as we go into the next season. The episode itself it suffers from a little bit of the Gilligan's Island ending problem, but we got to keep the show going. It is interesting that it's a standalone season finale. I really need to give the episode props for what it does well. I have been asking all along for threads that tie the larger story together, and now we've not only got a story that goes back to the Hirogen communications system, but also manages to explore the impact of Janeway's decision to make a pact with the Borg and defeat 8472, and the even wider implication for people that we knew nothing about. This is really good storytelling on the micro level, just, what happens to our characters on our ship, but on the macro level, what happens in the place where they are.
Can I ask you a question, John?
Yeah, of course.
If you decided to break this into a two-parter, where would you have ended this for the cliffhanger?
Aha. Okay. I think I'm funny. I was thinking about that the other day when I was watching it, and I thought, well, the most dramatic spot is you have Seven and Janeway on the Dauntless going into slipstream, and Voyager is somewhere far away, not into slipstream yet. Mm-hmm. And who knows how many hundreds of light years Dauntless has covered. Cut to see you next season. The problem is then you have to move everything else, and then you spend 45 minutes, what they very effectively cover in about 7 minutes in this episode. So that, to me, that's the most dramatic moment, but I think you could end it in a way that's kind of an unfair tease, which is, wow, everything works. We're ready to go back home. The crew is all on board Dauntless. We're about to go into slipstream. Oops, we found some alien technology. Arturis is not who he seems. Cut to see you next season.
Yeah.
That's not as dramatic, but in terms of telling the story the way they told it, that's at least an earlier point that you could create, Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think they did it right by doing it in one episode. I really do. And, it's cool to see an episode where we all understand as the audience that Janeway made decisions to win the day, but ultimately did not know what the repercussions would be. So then we get to argue, is she right? Is Arturis right? What else could have happened? I mean, we gamed this a little bit in the last segment. Let's say that Janeway lost and Voyager got assimilated. Well, what would have prevented the Borg from assimilating Arturis's people anyway? There's all these other possibilities to play out. And I think it's really interesting to examine maybe not necessarily who's right or who's wrong, but where can you apply responsibility, and what do you do with that information once you've got it? What does a guy like Arturis do once he has that and he's driven purely by revenge? And that's understandable. And I think Janeway makes an okay effort to try to talk him out of that and say there is another way here, but it's too late at that point. This episode, I think, works very well as a slice of Voyager to tie together some story threads, heighten some character interactions. And I think it works pretty well as Star Trek as well. It presents us really with a situation that is hard to parse and come down on the side of, black and white, good versus evil. You really just have to take a step back and say, well, this is a terrible situation. How can these characters act most ethically? And which one at the end of the day is the most ethical? Which one is the most right? And that's a debatable point. That's what makes this cool. Yeah, and just dramatically, look, we barely mentioned how good Ray Wise is, but he's wonderful in this. He's so good. There are nits to pick here. And especially in the VAM that we recorded for Patreon, a lot of stuff to get into there. But I'm going to say it holds up. How about you, Norman?
So this was a really tough decision for me on this one. Sometimes I'm very definitive about yes or no, but there's a lot to consider here. On the one hand, there's a great deal of exposition here, which helps further the overall narrative of Voyager. As we're closing out season 4, season finales have a certain reputation to uphold. And I think that the Next Generation's Best of Both Worlds season finale didn't do the franchise any favors, because that is the watermark. That is literally the highest bar, not just for Star Trek, but for fandoms in general to be able to meet. right? It was so good. Riker saying fire at the end. You don't know what's going to happen to Locutus or Picard, 3.5 months after that. So it's a little strange not having a season finale cliffhanger. That being said, I think it's interesting that, they were able to wrap up a lot of stuff here and maybe spend some of that 2-part budget on a 1-episode story, which allowed us to see a lot of the great Dauntless scenes. The sets with like the really nice the consoles and displays and things like that. And we talked about that earlier in observations. The whole thing with this is that it gave us a great reminder of season 4's arc in total, the Scorpion arc, which was phenomenal. A great opening to the season. It introduced 7 of 9, obviously, and then you have consequences to the alliance that Janeway made with the Borg and how it affected Arturus' race. The Dauntless, production-wise, amazing ship design. And yes, Ray Wise's performance as Arturus was heartbreaking. What do you do if your only recourse is revenge? We don't have enough time in another episode of Mission Log just to cover that as a moral meaning or message. His race was, annihilated because of Janeway's decision to ally with the Borg to let 8472, push them back into fluidic space. There are consequences, right? So there's something in this episode that I can't place my finger on that's a disconnect for me. Maybe it's because it doesn't feel like a finale, because it's 1 episode. There's no cliffhanger. Maybe it's because there's maybe too much telegraphing with Arturus' motivations. Like, there's no way that I actually believe that, hey, there's a guy that's translating stuff for free, and all of a sudden he comes on board and helps translate other stuff for free, and he's not a bad guy in any respect. Because we've seen that happen to Janeway time and time again, and it's a little obvious, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that, just doesn't really settle with me well. All that being said, there's one scene in this episode for me that's like the saving throw that I think makes this episode hold up. And there's something to be said about, I'm not sure if it just bothers me, maybe it might bother some of you out there. I don't know if it bothers you, John, but there's something that bothers me a great deal about Voyager as a series in total, and that's never really seeing the consequences of Voyager's presence in the Delta Quadrant and Janeway's decisions, or the ramifications of, or the consequences of. And in the scene where she and Arturus, interact, and Janeway says, in my estimation, this is at the kind of like the climax of the episode. On the Dauntless, Janeway says, in my estimation, species 8472 posed a greater threat than the Borg. Arturus says, who are you to make that decision? A stranger to this quadrant. And Janeway says, there wasn't exactly time to take a poll. I had to act quickly. Okay, sure. There's a reality to that. But this is where I will always side with Chakotay on this matter when it comes to his position on Scorpion, which removed Voyager from the equation and not get involved with the Borg. Right? There's a right or wrong to this. I believe that Chakotay was right. Janeway, as is her right as captain, decided to ally herself with the Borg, but Chakotay suggested to try a different way. And obviously, with Arturus, there were consequences to what Janeway said, and then Arturus pointed that finger at her and says, you are self-righteous. Of course you would say that there was, the greater responsibility was to Voyager. Because why wouldn't it be, right? Now, before all the emails roll in, I have gone on record, John, you know this. I've gone on record, we have gone on record for supporting Janeway and really enjoying her character. But for this season, for reasons that are probably more based in the production politics and the reality of that than in the in-universe world-building reality, Janeway's progression for me was skewed in a way that just didn't make sense to me, compared to the 3 years that we have come to know her so far. And I'm glad that this scene in this season at least gave us that more honest look at how other species saw the influence of Voyager in the Delta Quadrant. And I really wish that there was some type of final scene in this one episode. Maybe Janeway pours a cup of coffee. Maybe she sits in a ready room. Maybe she's in the dark. And she really thinks about what the consequences are for her decisions and how they reflect Starfleet's interests and Starfleet's traditions.
That could have been really interesting. Yeah, that would have been something to see. Well, let's talk about morals, meanings, messages. I already talked about it in the last segment. You can rewind if you want to. But I like there's this sort of trust but verify. And Janeway really gets into the verification. She uses the tools that she has, like Tuvok, to go figure out what's happening. To make sure that they're not getting themselves into trouble with this gift that has been delivered to them. So I like the lesson in critical thinking that we get there. The whole theme of the episode here is about these actions having consequences. And I think we can give Janeway some benefit of the doubt that she was doing the thing that fulfills the mission, which is get Voyager home safely. But it's impossible to know what the decisions toward that end might have in terms of consequences later on to others who are around you, others you haven't even met yet. So that is very interesting to see it play out. And then Arturis himself, this really tragic line that he has toward the end, revenge is all I have left. That is so heartbreaking. And as I said before, we can understand on some emotional level where he's coming from, that Arturis has every right to be angry. And at the same time, how do you break through to someone who has experienced unimaginable loss and pain and try to explain that decisions that were made at another time in another place without even the knowledge of who he was and who his people were, we're not about him. We're not directed at him. Again, I said it a moment ago that the thing that I like here is that we don't have a clear black and white answer, that we have debatable points about actions that have consequences. And I like that we're left with that here. I like that Arturis has the opportunity to express himself, and I like that Janeway tries to give him that one last chance. She even says it's not too late. He can come back with them, but he's too far gone at that point. So I love the exploration of that. I think they all add up to give us nice food for thought in this episode. What about you?
When you brought up that quote, "Revenge is all I have left," I was looking at my notes for this, and I'm going to put those aside for a second, because there is something that maybe needs to be at least put on the record here for what that means in terms of Star Trek and in terms of what Starfleet stands for. And of course, Starfleet stands for a better and more noble purpose, a better and more noble humanity. But when you have somebody like an Arturis watch his entire people suffer at the hands of, again, a side effect of a Starfleet decision, you have to think, is Khan justified, in his motivations? Because that's all he really has left is revenge against Kirk.
Yeah.
Then you think about the Son'a. Insurrection.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Starfleet has a noble purpose, but their noble purpose has side effects. And is it because of Starfleet's noble purpose that they feel that they're beyond reproach of those side effects? And I know that's not the point of Star Trek, but that is the reality of what happens when you insert a noble purpose into a situation where that is not necessarily wanted or invited. In our VAM, that is on our uncut version of this, recording, we were talking about the decision for Janeway, how it affected the Delta Quadrant because of the caretaker's decision to bring Voyager in. does Starfleet's interests outweigh the effects? Is it the cause of the effects that may cause catastrophic change in environments where it's not invited? Is that what we're
I mean, how do you explain this to somebody and say, well, no, this is for the good of so many others that we did this. I'm sorry that in retrospect this caused some problem for you. Like, how do you even have that conversation?
I know, and the thing is that I mean, I know that. Okay, like going back to like the Omega directives, we destroyed, Janeway destroyed the Omega particle at the behest of Starfleet's orders, but possibly like ruined another species.
Wrecked another civilization, yeah.
Right. So is that heaped upon Janeway's legacy and Voyager's legacy that Arturis is discussing here?
Yeah.
Right. So again, like there's so much at stake with every decision that a Starfleet captain makes. Is it incumbent upon one character to burden themselves with those decisions because they're not supposed to be where they're supposed to be? And how do you reconcile yourself with the outcome? And I do love the fact that this episode points that out, and that one single member of a species can bring that to bear on Janeway. And I do wish that in this episode we explore that a little bit more. And that's my only real concern about this episode, is that it was a little bit tossed aside. But that's just one of the messages that I got. The bigger message was, you can't force someone into your image, into what you want. And just because you think your way of life is the righteous path doesn't make it so. It just does for you. My example? And it took a while, but I'm glad that we finally were able to see and investigate the reason for Seven's attitude this entire season. And I appreciate that Seven, although she is slowly coming to terms with her life away from the Borg, isn't 100% on board with what Janeway wants and desires for Seven to be, and that's more human. That is what Janeway wants, not what Seven wants. And I'm glad that the writers punctuated this in the final exchange between them in this episode. Janeway says, "Sometimes you've got to look back in order to move forward. Sounds to me like you're starting to embrace your humanity." Seven says, "No. But as I said, nothing is impossible."
Logical to a fault. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, night.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. Should they have called this episode Dawn? Because then this season could have ended with one and done. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.